for you guys last night. If not, I can throw it on our.
Do you have it on a thumb drive? Oh, it's here? What's it called?
Blockland.
I don't know where he put it. Ken?
See if it's
Ken? Was it loaded up? It's in a PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, it's in a PowerPoint.
Yeah, so it should be here.
He's getting it, I think.
So the clicker, well, I'll show you as soon as we get it.
Yeah.
It's very easy. There's a pointer, laser pointer. And there's a forward and a reverse, and there's actually a blanker.
Okay. All right. Perfect. And you want to prefer to be sitting here?
Yeah, if you prefer to be here. Is this on? It is.
Yes.
Oh, it is. Whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, no, standing up is great.
Okay.
I'm more of a
stander upper. Stand up kind of guy?
Yeah, stand up kind of guy.
Where's the PowerPoint?
I don't, did you have a PowerPoint?
I emailed it to you. I can,
Can you get,
He's got it.
right down in community.
do you have a drive?
Downloaded on my phone.
Yeah.
Do you have a thumb drive right there you're using? Or no?
I've got one.
So we sometimes operate in blockhead chain configuration. Chain of blockheads. All right.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I should have asked before we.
Well, I've got a hookup where you can run your computer directly. It's just got a adapter.
Do you have an adapter?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can just do that.
You want to do that?
You won't have a clicker.
Actually, you're right. Let me just say, I'll just save it onto this. I'll just save it onto the drive and plug it in there.
What did they say? Due to technical difficulties?
Right. Well, you're supposed to identify this now.
Sorry.
Should I tap dance or?
Yeah.
Yeah? All right.
I think there's a separate port here. I think this is another. This is
Yeah.
another.
Can you fit it in there?
Yeah, we can. Unless it's real chubby. Unless it's real broad, where thumb drive should not be broad. Some of them do. They have a big handle on it.
Okay.
Ha.
Got it?
Got it?
Does it work? Okay, fine. You're good.
That's it.
That's it. All right, should I open it here or should I copy it to the hard drive?
Yes.
Okay, just open it.
Is that what?
That's it.
Is that what you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your patience.
Oh, hey, don't worry.
That blocks it, and then it advances it.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Good morning and welcome to our community forum. My name is Jim Boyle and I am the coordinator for this morning's forum on Blockland, Cleveland. We're privileged to have as our speaker today Dan Hanna, who has worked for the Cleveland Indians as Director of Marketing and Sales, and is a local Clevelander. He grew up right nearby and caddied at Canterbury Country Club as a kid and rode by our church at least 500 times, but has never been in the church before. He's a graduate of St. Ignatius High School and Cleveland State University with a degree in communications. He is co-chair of the community engagement team of the Blockland Initiative, which we will hear about today. The job of that initiative is to educate the public and to promote real-world blockchain application development in Cleveland. As you know, one of the goals of our church is to search and to serve. And we interpret that to mean that we want to bring important ideas to the congregation and to the public that may have an impact on their lives personally as well as the life of Cleveland as a community. And I think that blockchain technology and the blockchain initiative, Blockland initiative, fulfill that criteria. So turn it over to Don.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you for your hospitality this morning. It was some great conversation to get started, and it really is. I remember so vividly riding my bike up Belvoir, and I knew I was getting relatively close when I saw the peak of your church. And generally, it was downhill from there to get to Canterbury. So I appreciate that. There were a lot of 6 o'clock in the morning rides to Canterbury, and I was telling Jim, I'm the 6th of 7 kids, and I was a handful. And my mom knew the caddy master Mike Kiley over at Canterbury, and I was somewhere around 11 or 12 years old, and she just took me up there, and she said, Mike, I can't have him around anymore. He's yours. I'll drop him off at 4 o'clock. I will pick him up at 6. I don't care what you do with him, just as long as he's not at our house. Spent a lot of time in this area. So, and again, thank you very much for having me. Just real quick, by a show of hands, how many people have ever heard of Blockland prior to today? Okay. What about blockchain technology? And what about Bitcoin? All right, this is great, right? This is such a good. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to about 100 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and the percentages of Blockland and blockchain were so low. It was about 2 or 3 kids, and when I said Bitcoin, all 100 hands went up. It was incredible. So it's good to look at 2 different markets, right? You guys are not many 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the room, so appreciate it. So. All right, so Blockland, what is Blockland? How did I get involved? It's a fun story. I'll give you a little background on how I got involved with this and a little bit on the technology side. So I run a software company. We built some payment rails and compliance for independent contractors, and one of my developers was late, about a month late on a project. And anybody work in software? All right, so you're double the time, double the money when you get your first estimate, right? So he came into the office and he said, hey, we're having some trouble with the payment part, but you should really look at Bitcoin as a payment rails. And I'm like, get out of my office and would you just please finish your job? Okay. I felt bad. He was a young guy. So I went up to him later on in the day. I said, hey, once this is finished, let's go out and have lunch and you can tell me about this, goofy internet money that you're talking about. And that was in summer of 2016. So we talked, just some really good insight from a young software developer about what is engaging to him as he kind of grows into his career, and the prospect of building applications, building things on Facebook is not really all that appealing, but this new kind of innovative technology that really allows him to be creative in how he builds software is what really drove him, and it drove him to the point that he left us and he started his own blockchain development shop here in Cleveland. Has done exceptionally well over the past couple of years. So a light went off in my head talking to him as a developer, and his skills, and what is really kind of driving the mind share of those people, the people that really build the infrastructure for all the things that we use every day. If it's your computer, your phone, Facebook, Twitter, banking, all that sort of stuff is all driven by software right now. You really can't have. There are very few companies that are not really technology companies that are using technology to change and innovate in different industries. So that was my first kind of contacted with this blockchain and coin technology, which was really fascinating to me, and did a lot of research. Didn't fit into what we were doing, but about a year later, a friend of mine was with Bernie Moreno, and they went up to, Bernie did a really good job. Anybody here know Bernie personally? Yeah. No, he's a great guy. So he flew some people up to Toronto, some leaders in the city, had some media on the trip, and really introduced, the leaders in both political and education and business to this idea of, hey, how can we use blockchain technology as a catalyst to change and innovate in our economy here in Northeast Ohio. And so read that article, called my buddy and said, hey, like, this is really cool, I love the technology, can I help out? And he's like, yeah, sure, we got a meeting on Tuesday morning, why don't you come? So I went to a meeting, I raised my hand and said a few things, and Bernie said, great, you are gonna help plan a conference. I was like, all right. Didn't have no idea what I was getting myself into. So that was in May, and we pulled off, which I'll talk a little bit about here, a conference in December where we had over 1,800 people attend, 135 speakers from 7 different countries, and it was just an incredible conference all around technology, blockchain, and some of its use cases in real world use cases, not just this idea of trading Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So we got that done, and now we say, all right, we've got that first kind of flag in the ground was that conference. Now what are our goals next year, right? So the vision for Blockland is to transform Cleveland into a top 5 high technology city by using blockchain tech as a catalyst, right? This isn't going to have 1 million jobs in Cleveland in 2 years, but this is a technology where nobody has really established themselves as a leader in a country. So we're not behind the ball. We're not so far behind Silicon Valley or so far behind Austin or New York or Boston.
Toronto.
Charlotte, what's that?
Toronto.
Yes, Toronto is huge in this space, but the technology is so new. We have a chance we put some resources behind it to get ahead or keep pace with those cities in the development of this technology. And it's a real enabling technology, so it enables other uses if you're able to help build out the infrastructure. And if you think back, in the late 80s and early 90s, if we put a lot of money into manufacturing to kind of keep that going. If we would have taken some of those resources and put it towards this new thing called the internet, who knows what, could we have ended up a little bit more like Seattle or Pittsburgh or some of those other kind of cities that have a real strong tech economy as opposed to just manufacturing. So the goals that we've laid out for the next 12 to 18 months, execute on another conference, Blockland Solutions, and start to have regular events like this is the sort of stuff we're doing. So we're going out into the community and talking with people, engaging on what Blockland is trying to do and a little bit about the technology, and talking to you folks about how you can be involved. Recruiting a big tech company to Cleveland, and that is tied in a little bit with City Block, which I'll get to. Big part of developing a tech ecosystem is the startup world. So we're putting together startup packages to bring in talent, to bring in companies, to really make things very easy for a company. If, hey, I'm thinking about, relocating my startup or starting a company somewhere, I can say, hey, I can go to Silicon Valley, and if I have, $1.5 million that I've raised, that's probably about a 6-month runway in San Francisco. But you could get 18 months to 2 years out of that in Cleveland. Just in, but that's also part of the the allure of Silicon Valley, and it's just a different mindset where you can have a software engineer making $300,000-$400,000 at Facebook or Google or wherever, and they can leave, go to a startup, and that startup might fail, and that failure doesn't look, it's not looked at as a bad thing, right? It's looked at as a positive, and they can come right back into that ecosystem of Google and Facebook and get hired at a heartbeat and probably at a higher level because they've gone out and tried to build something that maybe failed or, it was too early or whatever. So that's, we have that sort of ecosystem in manufacturing, right? So if you're if you work anywhere in the manufacturing supply chain and your company downsizes, there's 100, 200 other jobs just like that in the area that you can go to, right? We need to get to that point with software developers and technology, and we've got a ways to go. Part of that is bringing these startups into town, and obviously with startups, funding is a huge part of it, right? So building pre-seed, seed, venture capitalist funds, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but we've got a couple of them that are already have raised some funds and are starting to deploy some of that. And then City Block. City Block is a really a big undertaking. It is an innovation center that we want to build in downtown Cleveland that is going to have probably upwards of 2,000 seats for technology startups to come and live and work in a space with a bunch of other people, and then kind of put these people in the same room, the same space, to talk and bounce ideas off of each other. It's been extraordinarily successful in places like Chicago and San Francisco and LA and New York and Boston. They have these innovation hubs. And we want to take it a little bit further. We want to wrap in a CMSD school called the Genesis School that lives in that space, and so they are exposed to technology from K through 12, and really give them an opportunity to see what it is, work with the startups and the technologists that are working and living down there. And we expect an announcement for that to happen here in the next month or two. I can't say where it's going to be yet, but it's going to be a great space once everything's done.
What is CMSD?
Cleveland Municipal School District, excuse me. So Blockland is totally open sourced, and anybody can come and join. We have over 1,000 people that are volunteering their time, like myself, who some are into technology, some are not, some are really, everybody is just working toward how can we make sure that our economy is in a good place, in the next 10 to 20 years, as opposed to the next 2 or 3 years. And technology there's a saying that software is eating the world. Almost everything we do, we're streaming right now, technology, right? So even when you go up into, a lot of churches now allow you to, say, hey, I'm just going to pull your phone out and send us some money on your phone, right? Software is eating all these different, and coming into all your lives in just about any way. The same sort of thing with business, right? Every business wants to operate as efficiently as possible, utilize their capital in the best possible way, and software really helps them do that, and do that at scale across, time, space, location, and all that sort of stuff. So you are all welcome to come. It's broken down into 7 different groups. We've got thought leadership. That's where I live. We go out and talk with people. We put the conference on and do a couple other events around town. The political and legal system, so that is both working with our legislators, both locally and at the state level, to put legislation in place that makes blockchain technology, it's a new technology, so the lawmakers are just starting to get a handle on this. the legal system, we have, this is really cool, right? So we have all the law schools in town working together to build curriculum for their students. And then we also have law firms working together to build curriculum for continuing education for all the lawyers in town. So we can be a place where, saying, hey, listen, we have lawyers that know this stuff and have done deals and have experience in doing that. Philanthropy and funding. Obviously, I talked a little bit on the venture side of things in funding startups. The philanthropy side is really about making sure that the underserved community in Cleveland does not miss out on this technology. And this is something that has happened. It's not unique to Cleveland. It's unique to really most places around the world. Is that we have to make sure that the underserved community we are engaging with them and giving them the opportunity to engage back with this technology as an opportunity to change their lot in life. Research and innovation. We've got universities across the area working together on the innovation side. The place that is the city block that I mentioned. Next Gen. This is a group of, it's 35 and younger, so I don't quite qualify. I'm a few years too old, but they have about 600-700 people just in that, separate from the 1,000 people that are volunteering, just engaged in that group to talk about technology in Cleveland and blockchain and how that group can influence where we go with this. And then talent and business applications, that is, I don't remember the exact number of how many open positions for software developers are in town, but it's somewhere, there's more jobs open than we have developers in town to fill it. And we have an extraordinarily talented pool of developers and software engineers, but most of them work for Progressive and Key, and so this is a group that's working on that, and they've actually instituted a CIO, CTO roundtable with about 20 of the top CIOs and CTOs in town, saying, hey, all right, here's what we need. How do we get there, right? And part of one of our things we need to do is probably need to develop locally 1,000 plus developers on an annual basis to keep up with this. So if you see anything on here that is interesting to you, or you'd want to be involved, you let me know. Jim has my email. You can email me directly, and I'll introduce you via email to the co-chairs that are running this, and they'll get you in the loop. So the more hands we have, the easier the lift is. All right. We can get into some of the specifics on when we get to your questions on kind of what blockchain technology is. But really, it's about 10 years ago, an anonymous person online released what they call a white paper that talked about technology that underpins this thing called Bitcoin that we talked about earlier. And it solves, one of the big problems with a digital world is this ability to copy something and send it out to whoever. So it's like a digital music file, right? I can take it, I can copy it, I can send it to two people. They don't necessarily know who has the original and who has the copy, right? So what this one of the big problems that this software solved was this double spend or double share problem. And when you're dealing with money or something of value, it's a much bigger deal than a music file. And we can talk a little bit later about some of the specifics of the technology. But basically it allows, it's a database, right? So it says, hey, we all have databases, Excel spreadsheets or whatever that you keep, that keeps track of who owns what. But what makes this a little bit different is, instead of me just having a copy and you all trusting that I've kept the right numbers in place where they should be, we all have a copy of the same database. And every time there's a transaction, everybody's database is updated. And if everybody agrees that, hey, what just went in there is accurate, right? So if I have $5, I send it to Jim, you all can see into my bank account saying, yep, he's got $5, and he can send it to Jim. And once it's sent, everybody agrees, I don't have a way to go back and pull that money back from Jim, so and transaction's final. So it's kind of, you know, the best way that I've heard it is kind of triple input accounting, right? So Jim and I both have a copy of what just happened, but so do all of you, and we all kind of keep a check on each other. And then through cryptography and a couple other technologies that are out there, you don't have a way to go back and change something that happened in the past. So once it's in the database, it can't be changed. So which is good when you're dealing with actual money. So that's, you know, it's consistent, it's immutable. Decentralized is that everybody has a copy of it, and it's available to anybody. So like any of you could download the software behind Bitcoin and verify transactions all around the world, and you can get paid for doing it. So that's kind of that's a little bit, just kind of at a high level of the technology. Now how it's used, right? So this is actually old. There's some new additions. So if you look at some of the companies that are doing things with blockchain technology, IBM, JP Morgan, Amazon, Microsoft, MasterCard, Bank of America, Salesforce, FedEx, Walmart, you know, some of the biggest companies in the world are all using this technology in different ways to make their organization, their companies, operate more efficiently, have more accountability both to themselves and with their customers and their suppliers. This is, you know, even from here, Facebook is getting into this blockchain technology right now. We're not sure how it's going to look, but they are talking about a company that could really open up, you know, 2.5 to 3 billion people to this technology, you know, with a flip of a switch, is pretty amazing. Just a couple things recently, like JP Morgan just announced this. It's called the JPM coin. Anybody read anything about this? So basically, JP Morgan, they use it really for internal transfers. So if you have, I'm a client at JP Morgan in New York, and I have a counterparty in Japan. There's a lot that you have to go through to transfer dollars into another country. The way JP Morgan's going to use this is so you give JP Morgan $1 million, they give you $1 million of this JPM coin. You can send this JPM coin to your counterparty in Japan instantaneously. They can take that, go hand this JP Morgan and they get $1 million in cash back. So that what used to take several days and several counterparties along the way, lots of people touching it and very expensive, is now done in an instant. It doesn't cost you next to nothing. For me, when the light went off for me, so I have a sister that lives in Melbourne, Australia, and it's very difficult to send money back and forth. So like, think about like Christmas gifts and all this sort of stuff. That I'm one of 7, so we're all kind of throwing money all around, right? It's not easy to send money back and forth. It's really expensive. You just gotta go to the bank. It costs like $50, and you know it's just a hassle, right? So she has a 19 and a 21-year-old son and daughter, and I said, hey, I'll send Georgia some Bitcoin, and we'll be good. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, she'll have it in 10 minutes. She said, what are you talking about? I sent it, and Georgia had it in less than 10 minutes, and it cost me 14 cents to send a couple $100. And I did it sitting on the couch at midnight on a Saturday. So, I mean, that was when the light went off, right? For me, like, hey, there's some real, this is a game changer on a number of levels. You know, some of the big ones, Walmart is using blockchain technology to track all of their lettuce. So from where, you know, who grew it, who transported it, when it hit, you know, Walmart's docks, when it hit, you know, the store docks, and when there is a, you know, an outbreak of E. coli, they can look into this blockchain and say, oh, right, so, hey, this lettuce, we tracked it back to this grower, all right, let's pull all of just this grower's lettuce off the shelves as opposed to everybody's. And there's a number of other use cases in kind of that supply chain where you have a lot of different people, organizations working together, but they don't necessarily communicate very well, and they really just are in a sense trusting each other without any verification for what they're doing. What blockchain technology brings to the table is accountability, openness, and transparency, and trust. Same sort of thing with financial transactions, right? So that same sort of thing. There's a level of transparency. They're adding in trust. I can transact with somebody on the other side of the world not knowing who they are, and I can trust the software of that. If we put the certain parameters in, it's going to execute, and either I'm going to get my Bitcoin or I'm going to send a Bitcoin to him in exchange for a good or service. Or there's hundreds, thousands of other cryptocurrencies, what they call them, that you can do the same sort of thing. So this is a little bit about Blockland by the numbers. This is a little outdated, so probably over 1,000 volunteers. We put together the conference in 5 months, 1,700 attendees, 135 speakers, 10 working groups. We've got a fairly decent Facebook following. We had 42 startups come to Cleveland for the conference. We've already had 2 of them that have committed to come to Cleveland and build their companies, which is fantastic. We had people from 22 different states, 7 different countries around the world come to Cleveland for that conference. Early returns, so a little bit on the political side. So we had, Ohio was the first state in the union to accept cryptocurrencies to pay your taxes. So you can go on to ohiocrypto.com, and if you have taxes that are due, you can pay it in Bitcoin or a couple other options. We're the first one to do it. I think I'm fairly certain that Bernie's company was the first one to pay the taxes in the state with it. So Josh Mandel, who's a local Northeast Ohio, as he was leaving Secretary of State, he was the one that implemented that. We also were the first state to accept a digital signature on a blockchain as equivalent to a wet signature on a contract. Doesn't sound all that impressive, but it is when you're talking about, some of this technology allows you take a paper agreement, put it into a digital form, and tie it in that digital signature is a big deal. We've got 2 funds in town that are committed. Flash Starts is going to start a $6 million pre-seed fund. Pre-seed is basically like you have an idea, you've built a product before you have really any customers, but you need money to, make sure the product's fit for, what the customer wants, and then you got to go out and acquire some customers. And Jumpstart, which is one of the larger venture-backed funding companies in town, is raising a $100 million seed fund. So that is very early stage. So you've got your product, you've got a couple of customers, and you need the funding to grow. And the Blockchain Research Institute, we have an agreement with them. They're out of Toronto. They have about 150 or so really in-depth research reports that normally a company would have to pay $150,000 to get access to. Anybody in Northeast Ohio, as long as you don't work at a company that has revenues of more than $1 billion, can get access to this for free. I can share with Jim the information for that. It's fantastic. It's you could spend days and days and days reading some of the stuff on there. It's really, really impressive. What's next? This is a little bit about what we were talking about the goals, but like train 1,000 developers, establish business clusters, the innovation hub, the investment that we talked about, get startups in here, into Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, work with the state on blockchain legislation, and really enable some merchants in Northeast Ohio to start accepting cryptocurrencies for payment. So that's it. I wanted to kind of get through that, because I got through that relatively quickly. We got, I think only one person fell asleep, so that's good.
We have a few rules about the questions. First of all, we have people on either side of the room with microphones, and raise your hand and they'll give you the microphone. And please keep the questions short and no speeches, please. And talk directly into the microphone so that everybody can hear you. We also have a clipboard which we will be passing around, and anybody who is not on our email list, please, if you'd like to be on the list for future forums, give us your email. We don't share this with anyone. So we'll go ahead with the questions.
Yeah, fire away.
Hi. I don't understand the whole process of paying your taxes with a currency that fluctuates as wildly as something like Bitcoin does. Can you explain that to me? If I pay my taxes today and it's worth this, 10 minutes later it could be worth half of that. How does the state manage?
So the state works with a company, I believe it's called BitGo. I think it's BitGo. But what they do is, so they take the payment in, and at that exact moment, they lock that price in for your Bitcoin, and then they sell it and they give the state the cash, the USDs. So the state's not taking that in and holding any rate fluctuation, so they're taking it and selling it as fast as they can.
Yeah, and the second question is, we didn't assume that there were going to be 1 million hackers in the world hacking into things. What guarantees that hackers will not be able to defeat the immutable quality of I mean, so, yeah.
It's a great question. So here is one of the ways, and this is probably the best way to think about this, right? So if I'm a hacker and Jim's the bank, we'll say, or you name it, right? He has all the data that I want. I just have to put all of my resources into beating Jim at one time, and he's just got to be wrong once, right? With blockchain technology, all of you have the same copy of the database. I have to hack 50% plus one of you guys at the exact same time, and with nobody else noticing that I'm doing it. And if I can do that, then I can go back and change things, because then I have enough say to say, yes, this is the new history of it. Which makes it really difficult. Is there are about 12 to 15,000 people running the blockchain software around the world. So you would have to identify all those people and then have the resources to attack 51% of them and be able to do it so fast that nobody would notice. Is very, very, very good. Nobody's been able to do it in 10 years, and people have been trying. So they think so the way it would cost, you would have to acquire the hardware and the Bitcoin, and it might cost you a couple of $2 billion to attack it. But if you attacked it, then all that money you just spent, the Bitcoin will be worthless, and the equipment that you need, the hardware you need to do it, will be worthless right now. So it doesn't. There's no incentive to spend $3 or $4 billion to attack something and then have all that money, all that $3 billion you just spent, go to zero.
The cryptocurrency isn't the only thing that's involved in this. I mean, you could hack other kinds of things besides the monetary value, couldn't you?
So yeah, the blockchain is like I said, is a database, right? So it's a database of records of transactions, right? And the way the technology works is, so there's say 1,000 transactions that get it up to a certain amount, and then this is where the software part goes in. You have to, all 12,000 people in the world running the software are trying to guess a cryptographic, basically like question, and it's basically guessing how many ones and zeros there are. The best way I've heard it described is you flip a coin. It's like flipping a coin, and the first one to flip heads 1,000 times in a row wins. Right? So you're just literally, this machine is just guessing all the different combinations of ones and zeros until somebody gets it right, right? And then they get, when they guess it right, they get what they call a block reward. So they take all that data, put it into a block. They get paid for doing that, and they connect it, and there's what they call a hash, which is a cryptographically secure way to say, hey, this is like a picture of this data at this time, and they connect it to the next block in the previous block. So if anybody goes in to try and change any transaction that happened in the past, everybody will know, because all that hash, which is just a string of numbers, will change. It's this is part of the reason why I don't get into all that stuff. It's very complicated, and you know.
Okay, a couple of somewhat related questions. Run all these databases, and the related question is, how does all of this fit in with Sustainable Cleveland 2019 and the efforts to have both a economically and environmentally
quite a bit of it. I probably wouldn't recommend that anybody jump in and start mining Bitcoin. The people that are spending those resources, reusable energy exists. If it's hydro, if it's at a cheaper cost than they can otherwise. So it is actually helping to build up this, you know, the for them, right? So they said, hey, we can go into these areas where the cost of electricity is cheaper. The really good things that's come out of, you know, some of this energy that is so again, I can't speak for Sustainable Cleveland, but I don't think there are very many miners in Cleveland because there's a lot of, if you can be profitable to mine, and there's, you know, the cost of energy in Cleveland is relatively high compared to other areas where they can go and find this renewable energy right now. So I don't know if Sustainable Cleveland is
community. I wanted to ask you, what steps, if any, has FedGov taken? And I do not recall any statements by Senators Harris or Sanders in Medicare for All related to blockchain.
on a federal level. They are in the technology and how it could be used. So I don't think I wouldn't hold a lot of federal programs looking at doing this. This is probably more on, you know, say 1 to 3 years. But they're learning the Dayton area is forward a couple of pieces of legislation on the federal level. You know, just yesterday, there was an email that a company looking in the Cleveland. They were focusing on Cleveland obviously because the clinic and UH and a lot of things that we do here. You know, I would imagine that
Mr. Boutros at Metro Health Medical Center, who's the Cleveland Foundation, has talked about how they were how this would work in those kind of.
There's a lot of ways that, you know, the meta it's not easy because you have so many regulations built around those. But our medical files by law, right? How many wanted to bring it to, say you're moving to Florida and I want to bring, I have no idea how to do that. But we're supposed to be able to do that. Are built, they don't want us to leave. Been built over time. There's a real barrier to that. So you know, my medical files live on a very easily be able to bring infrastructure needs to be built up around that. Whole organizations working together. An application that would give all of them access to not exist in the medical field right now. Like my dad, you know, he frustrated, you know, and a lot of barriers to
buy bitcoins. Bitcoins.
Here is investment advice or legal advice. Advisor. So, how you would go about buying it? Conversation with my developer friend, I was kind of went down the rabbit hole reading a lot about this stuff, and oh, this stuff is really cool. I'm really interested in it. And he looks at me, he's like, "Don't be an idiot." Garbage, you know. And I was like, oh, like one of the bigger exchanges you can go and buy Bitcoin or the time it took him to I'm like, forget you, man. I just wow. He texts me, he's on his way back. And he's just like, great. I sold it, you know, with it. And so my brother, and I just kept my brother going, and you know, it's up. Like, I doubled my money on my Amazon or you know, a bond that you want to sell. It's the price. And I have absolutely no idea how, you know, if you want to try and put like data that you can use to kind of establish a price, it's just totally different than, it's closer to you know, trying to figure out like there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever. A lot of different inputs on what people value it for.
Idea. And as a former wrong, just simply wrong information. Wrong, just simply wrong information. So if it's immutable and uneditable, how do you fix those errors?
So somebody else can't go back and change your input. So if there's a technology called public key, private key encryption. So I have the private key to my, so So I have the private key to my, so that the original piece of data that still exists there, I can go in and say, hey, this was wrong. I've now changed it. It still exists there. I can go in and say, hey, this was wrong. I've now changed it. So it's immutable by other public key that, or private key that only you access.
It's unhackable.
Yes, nothing is unhackable, but it is, the incentives are not there for people to hack it, and the difficulty is pretty high.
So, there are a couple of issues that I have with the Bitcoin.
Hold the microphone closer to your mouth.
There are a couple of issues that it came up relative to Bitcoin and what's the other blockchain. Those are very, very high on quantum computing. And the March 2019 issue of IEEE Spectrum pointed out that that will never work. It will not only consume lots of power, but it needs more qubits than there are subatomic particles in the universe. So that is a problem with all the encryption and electronic currencies. Heating the homes of the impoverished, and they are running into trouble keeping their homes heated. Where should the energy go?
Quantum computing, other than it's way over my pay grade. But I do know that there are actually people at NASA here in Cleveland that are working on some of these problems right now.
And there are some promises in it, like if I change a in there, went away.
If you say so. But so in terms of the energy usage, again, like goes back to what I said earlier about the energy is really kind of, and the big thing with energy is like you need to use it. It's very difficult to store, and it's very difficult for it to travel long distances. So you may be able to, some of these places may be able to produce energy, goes away. So that's part of what the industry is actually helping these renewable energy projects as to be customers, right? To help to build up the infrastructure.
Yes, can you tell us why the sellers of cryptocurrencies want our dollars instead of their cryptocurrencies?
So I missed the salaries?
Sellers.
Oh, the sellers. So there's you need on ramps and off ramps, right? So you need dollars to come in, and you need a place to take dollars out. The majority of the transactions, kind of happen probably crypto to crypto. One of the things that so Bitcoin has had this real big boom or bust cycles. Like it'll go up, 1,000%, and then come down. It's had, I think 380+% drawbacks. And each, they call these things, they call them crypto winners. Like we're in a crypto winter right now. It's a big drawdown, about 85% or something like that. Each of those drawdowns, there have been more on ramps for where you can take U.S. dollars or euros or whatever, and more ways for people to put that money to work into cryptocurrencies. Coinbase is one example that was built, I think, in 2014. And right now, there is a lot of infrastructure being built for, custodianship. So the big players like, institutional money, like if you think about your retirement accounts, there would be no way for you to buy any of these assets in your retirement accounts. Right now, Fidelity has just launched a product where, institutional money that manages this stuff right now for you. They can come in and legally and buy and get access to some of these assets right now that wasn't there 12 months, 24 months ago. So each time there's just been this drawdown, there's been more infrastructure built for people to take their U.S. dollars or their investment dollars or speculation dollars and put it into these assets. This has really been a retail-driven phenomenon, so it's just been normal people taking their dollars and put it in, and there hasn't been a lot of hedge funds or big banks that are putting money into this stuff, which they've missed out on a big chunk of returns over the past 10 years. So they've seen that now. They're starting to build out the infrastructure. So when you call your contact at Fidelity or Bank of America or wherever and say, hey, listen, I'd like to get a little exposure to Bitcoin in my retirement account. Like, I'm not telling anybody to hold it in there, but hey, I wouldn't mind putting 1% in and seeing what happens, right? Take a shot. Those tools are now being built right now, and then there's ways to get in, faster ways to get in and get out, and I mean that's really what Wall Street does, right? They see something, an asset that has a good return, they figure out a way to get their money in and get returns, and pensions are starting to look at it, endowments are starting to look at it. Is this an asset class that we should at least be looking at? Not putting significant dollars behind it, but just starting to look at and poke around that.
My listening to what has been said has developed a logical problem. Solve my problem.
You got it.
One of the things you said about blockchain was that everybody gets a copy and they can all agree on what's in it.
Yes.
You also said that medical records could be part of this, and medical records could be encrypted. So if everybody puts in their particular stuff encrypted, how can everybody else agree that that's what's there?
So, great question, and I probably should have done a better job describing this. So, so think about the people that are looking at this thing that are validating, hey, yes, this can go. It's saying, Jim's a physician. I know that he is allowed to read and write on this document, right? So he has the credentials to be able to do that. Me, I'm not. So if I get access to somebody's medical record and I'm in there messing around with it, and I try and append something to it, right? Pardon?
That's not the only issue. There's a privacy issue.
Yeah.
Never mind whether you can alter it or not.
Yes. So there's a layer of encryption that I didn't really get into. So, but it goes back to some of that private key.
How can you monitor it if you can't see it? Yeah. Because you're not authorized, like you're not the doctor. Then you can't monitor it.
So good way to think about it, right? So I can see my medical record, right? I can share it, and it's encrypted. So I have a specific, I think of it as a password. It's more complicated than a password, but I have a password that I can get in, and then what I can do is I can share it with Jim, and Jim has a password that gets him into to read and write on my file, and maybe some of it's encrypted, maybe it's not. It just depends on how much I want to share with them. And this is all hypothetical, right? There are people that are building these things that are far, far smarter than I am, and that have kind of these answers to those questions. But it's, what it comes down to is there's a cryptographically secured data, and then being able to share that data with particular people. And not everybody, just that particular person.
Hi, Jeremy Crossfield with youarthetech.com. The state of Wyoming has shown very strong leadership in passing 13 laws. They pushed through the legislator to be the standard and leader in the blockchain technology world. How does Cleveland and Ohio compare as one of the competitive states seems no one's gonna catch up to Wyoming and what they're doing right now. And, what are the advantages of us here in Ohio?
So I will say that Wyoming has, they've done a phenomenal job. I'm trying to remember, it's, there's one woman who's really driving the bus on that. I'll remember her name at some point, but they've done a phenomenal job. I mean, there's lots of regulatory uncertainty around the technology. And what they have tried to do from a state level is answer as much of that regulatory uncertainty as they can, which is great. One of the things that is still a concern is the federal level, if they decide to put some regulations in place, they will supersede some of what they've done in Wyoming, which is still a concern. But they've done a great job. In what does Ohio need to do? I mean, we need to look at what they've done and see where that fits in what we can do in Ohio.
Are you optimistic that?
I am. Yeah, I'm very optimistic. I think we have great dialogue with the lawmakers. We've had some initial success, both from a legislative side and a couple of projects along the way. So I'm very, and I think some of the leadership is very aware of the impact technology in general has, and they want to make Ohio as welcoming a place for technology, especially cutting edge technologies to domicile and grow here. So I'm hopeful, but Wyoming's moved incredibly fast, and they've done some really, really good things.
What about the international implications of this, both to our economy and to political initiatives internationally?
Yeah, so so this technology doesn't know any borders. I'll tell that story about me sending this technology that allows peer-to-peer transactions, and there's been a string of a couple hundred people that have just simply sent money to each other along the way, and it's been, I don't know, like 60 countries or something along the way, but the money went from, this is kind of amazing, it went from the United States to somebody in Iran, and then somebody from Iran into somebody into Israel, and then from somebody in Israel into somebody in Venezuela. So that money being able to, it probably scares some people in government. Source, it's permissionless, so you don't need to go to, the Bitcoin institution to be able to transact or interact with Bitcoin.
Is there a country that's leading any of these initiatives?
So yeah, I think there's a lot of work going on all over the world. I mean, there's a lot of work in Asia. And each, like China probably has, is leading in terms of like the mining and when we're talking about the energy usage. Toronto was where another blockchain called Ethereum was developed. So there's different countries that are leading the way, and the United States is doing a great job, and I think our, the government in terms of regulation has had kind of a soft hand and is letting it grow, but with the understanding that they want to protect, especially they want to protect investors as much as they can. But no, I think it's I mean, something like 15 million people in the world might, own or have transacted in Bitcoin. Anyone's guess.
I think we'll have to stop. The next forum next week will be on confront from the psychology department at Cleveland Clinic, and upstairs today, for anyone who is interested, Mark Weber will be conducting the service and giving a sermon on bring back the snakes, and